Hello, how are we doing today? All smiles, I hope. So today we have the St. Patrick's Day Florida State hat. We got a little track shirt on here, a little more intelligently sourced clothing once again. So this one should be a short one, but before we get started, Anna, put the phone away and pay attention. And Snigda, turn off the K-pop. Take the headphones off unless they're already permanently stuck to your head so we can get on with this. Thank you. So here we go. This is called succession. This is like, Queen Elizabeth is going to be succeeded by Prince Charles, and he'll be King Charles. And so that's what this succession is also. As time goes by, different kinds of species of things come to live in a particular ecosystem, and the group of those things is again called a community. So that's simply what this is, right? At any point in time, what do you have living there? Do you have bunny rabbits? Do you have palm trees? Do you have whatever, whatever? So here is two quite unnecessary vocab words, but here we go. They're not difficult. Somebody decided that if the place we're starting our story is a lifeless area, which is impossible because there's always prokaryotes, but we humans are good at ignoring prokaryotes, right? But here's the key. Is there no soil? How would you have a place where there's no soil? Well, there's two main kind of ways, and I'm going to illustrate them on the next couple slides. But one would be like after a volcano. So if you have that situation, you are starting your story from that point in time, bare rock, then your story of succession is called primary succession. But if you're starting your story from a point of time when you've killed almost, but not all life, but soil remains, then we're going to call your story secondary succession. Totally unnecessary vocab words, but here we go. Aha. So, if you have this volcano, this would be like volcano under the water, right? And the lava piles up and it breaks the surface. Now you have some bare rock, right? Out in the middle of the ocean, let's say. Or you have a big glacier. This is a big glacier. It's a slowly moving, literally a river of ice that's so heavy it actually moves. And like a big bulldozer, it just scrapes up all the things in front of it. And as it moves this way, it leaves bare rock behind it. Okay? So here's the basic idea. You have bare rock. What can possibly live on bare rock? Well, plants can't because they need soil. And again, this is primary succession, and this story is no soil to start with. So, what can live there? Well, two kinds of things that can live there are besides the prokaryotes, which we continue to ignore, lichens. Remember what those are? Lichens are a symbiotic relationship between algae, or sometimes cyanobacteria, and fungus. Right? They're a little package of both of them living together, and I showed them to you on the little log I had in class. So that and some kind of plants can live stuck to rock, and those would be the mosses, right? The true mosses, not like Spanish moss. These kind of things, since they can be the first living things there on this rock, are referred to as pioneer communities. Now here is a conceptual part of all of this succession thing that is good to put in the story right now. As these lichens and mosses live and grow and die and excrete and secrete chemicals, they break this rock up and now we start to have soil. So in producing soil and helping to produce soil, they have set the stage for the ability for other things to live there, like plants. How would plants get to this island? Well, their seeds might fly around, or maybe a bird might eat those plants somewhere and fly here and poop those seeds out on here. And now you have, on this bare rock with a little bit of lichens and mosses, now you have plants start to grow. Now you have some different kinds of living things, and this is simply the succession idea. Before we had Queen Elizabeth, now we have King Charles, right? As these plants grow and these lichens and things, they also provide food for animals. How are animals going to get there? Well, if they can fly like birds, they fly. Or they can get there on like little rafts of floating stuff in the ocean. There's plenty of ways that animals can get to places, even humans bringing them there. And we'll get back to that story later. But here's the other part of succession. As time goes by, what happens is shorter plants get succeeded by larger plants. Part of the reason that happens is the breakdown of this rock continues and more soil builds up. And so these little plants don't need much soil to set their roots in, but these big plants do. So when there's enough soil, then if the seeds of these big plants get here, then they're going to grow, and their height gives them a little bit of competitive advantage over the little plants. And here we have a trend of succession. The life forms, if we just focus on plants, the life forms get on average taller. This doesn't mean they're growing. This means these are different kinds of plants than was there before. And that's simply the primary succession story. Secondary succession story isn't much different, except here's the idea. You already have these plants. Let's make a Christmas tree, right? You have animals and you have all kinds of things, animals with ears and so forth and all that good stuff, right? And you have soil, right? Then what happens? Fire happens. This is the most common thing that sets the stage for secondary succession. Fire kills most of these things, but not all of them, and it leaves the soil. So now, instead of these big trees, you don't have any more, but you do have soil. You've also probably got some seeds that needed that fire to be able to sprout. You might be familiar with this idea. Fire actually sets the stage for new things to live there. So now if you start your story right here, right, you are telling a story of secondary succession, but the idea is the same. Pretty soon, big trees are going to grow back there, and we get different kinds of life forms from the time when we started our story to another time. But again, we only started our story here. This land that we're talking about had gone through succession before we started this secondary story. So that's what makes all of this really part of a continual story that involves a particular piece of land and the changes that it goes through in terms of what kind of living things are on it. So here we have, this is like I told this pioneer communities. We've said all this, the glacier stuff, and here's an example of a place where that's happened. And so here's the secondary succession kind of story. Some of these kind of events are set the stage of by people, either setting fires or cutting down forests, right? But if you still have soil and you start your story at that point, then we call it secondary succession. The term climax community, that's kind of an enigma, because what this kind of refers to is the fact that at a certain point in time, you're going to have plants growing here that aren't going to be succeeded by taller ones. They're like the biggest ones around. And so somebody decided, well, that's kind of the end of the succession. Well, you never have an end of the succession. You might have an end of a particular story where this land went from little short plants to bigger plants and animals and things, right? But you never have an end to the story. So this climax community idea is kind of a false premise in the first place. So here's a little diagram, which is often like on a test thing, and this is a little confusing, but what you have here is one piece of land. But what they're really showing here is that at a certain point in time, you have these living things. And then this little place represents a different point in time. Time has gone by here. And again, in general, just looking at plants, you have ones that are a little bit taller. And after a little bit more time on this same bit of land, right? These are all the same pieces of land. They've scrunched them into one picture here. You have taller trees, and eventually you have the tallest trees. If you want to call this a climax community, you can, right? But if a volcano erupts and covers all this in rock, or if a fire burns all this, then you start another story, right? So the succession thing is just a continuing set of stories. I hope you enjoyed this story today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.